Yes, hello, everyone. I see some familiar faces and some people that I have not seen before. And I'm very happy to be here again, talking to you about something that is very important to me. And I might get a bit emotional and might cry a little bit, so I'm just warning you. Don't worry about it, it's just something that makes me feel very, I don't know, emotional, yes. Thank you for letting me be here again, speaking to you. And I want to thank especially Gregory, who's always welcoming me and encouraging me to participate in your activities, which I really appreciate a lot. So today, I'm going to share with you 3 key moments in Mexican history. Sometimes I have noticed that foreigners get a little bit confused between what our celebrations mean. We have Cinco de Mayo, we have an Independence Day, we have the anniversary of the Mexican Revolution, and some people kind of get confused with what it is about, with the dates, and what to do about it. So we are going to make a little journey through time, and I'm going to try to be brief, and it's a lot of information. There are several dates, there are several names. I'm sure that you're not going to be able to remember the whole thing because it's kind of complex. So if anyone's interested in getting the information afterwards, you can give me your email on this notebook that I'm going to leave there at the end, and I can send it to you so you can review it at home and be more informed with it and keep it for yourselves. So we are going to start with the first documented foreign intervention that we have, which is the Spanish conquest. This happened in the early 16th century under King Charles I, who was also known as Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire. He was king of Spain, and his forces arrived in the Americas, led by Hernán Cortés, but there were many other conquerors, not only him. And they started exploring the territory, and they tried to see what the indigenous people were like. Some of them started making alliances with some of the tribes and other cultures, always thinking about how to deal with these people, because they were so different. They had a completely different way of living. They looked different. I mean, it was a cultural shock for both countries, for both peoples, to see this happening. The indigenous people hadn't seen horses before. They had never seen someone in an armor, so it was like a shock completely to them. And there was this kind of intention from the Spanish trying to make supposed contact with the Aztec Empire in a friendly way. They were just really trying to see who else they could become allies with so they could defeat it. And they found an ally in the people from Tlaxcala, because the Aztecs were a very, very powerful group of people, and they used to take tribute. They used to make wars with their neighbors, so they were not very liked by the people who lived near them. So many of them allied with the Spanish, and that led to the defeat of the Aztec Empire during the reign of Moctezuma II, who was the last Mexican emperor. So this marked the beginning of over 300 years of colonial rule, which totally, this is usually called a conquest, but it was really an invasion. And the Spanish tried to erase everything from the Mexican cultures. They started with trying to change the religion and turn all the people into Catholics, because that way they would be much easier to control. And they were very upset to see that as much as they tried, the indigenous people kept doing what they liked. They kept worshipping their gods in secret. They kept their customs, so they had to make this whole adaptation of traditions and mix some elements of indigenous culture and the new European culture so that the indigenous people could be more related to what they wanted to do. So the colonial society was structured in a very unequal way, and people were classified based on where they were born and their ancestry through a system of castes. This is like a ladder. So at the bottom of this ladder were the African slaves and their descendants, and they were followed by the people who were mixed of indigenous and black roots, which were called sambos. So these were like the people who had the less rights. No one really cared about what their needs. They were treated horribly. And at the top of this ladder were the Spanish who were born in Spain. They were called the peninsulars. And they had all the power and all the control and everything, all the wealth. They were like the reigning class, you know. And there were many, many other steps in this ladder. And you can see, if you go to Chapultepec Castle in Mexico City, at the museum, there is several paintings that describe the different castes and how they were mixed. For example, white and black, and a specific name for that. Indigenous and white, indigenous and peninsular. So there was a whole system which was the base of the society. Some people were not allowed in churches because of their status. Some people were not allowed to go to certain places. It was a very, very strict thing. And the Spanish did not want it to end at all. They were perfectly happy the way it was. And one of the steps in this ladder were the criollos, who were the descendants of peninsular Spanish, but they had been born in the Americas. They were often wealthy and well-educated, but they were excluded from the political positions of highest level. So among with all the economic restrictions, with the trade being controlled by Spain completely, the social inequality and the influence of the Enlightenment ideas, the independence movement started on September 16, 1810. So when we celebrate the independence, we are celebrating the beginning of the independence, not the end of it. It started on the 16th, as some of you might know. We celebrated on the 15th. This date was changed. I will later explain to you why and who did that. And the beginning of the independence. For many years, educated people have been talking about wanting to change things because they were just tired of Spain, of this control, of this inequality. Everyone was just sick of it. And they really, the Spanish crown was not thinking about letting go of this power at all, because it was something very convenient for them. They were making a lot of money and they were getting many things from the Americas. So they were not thinking about independence at all, ever. Their mind was to keep it like a colony forever. So several people started talking about doing something about it. And during September 16, the whole armed movement began with something that we call Grito de Dolores, the cry of Dolores. Dolores is a town in Guanajuato, and that is where the whole rebellion started. And it was led by a priest whose name was Miguel Hidalgo. There were many other figures around him, but he is the main figure in our independence history. He's considered to be the father of our country. And he has been criticized like most important political figures, social figures. There's always many versions about their life, which we really cannot know what the truth is because it's been so long and there's so many things written. People have many opinions, but many people have thought, oh, he was a priest, so he should have been this. But we cannot judge someone from our time because we have no idea what it was to live back then. Priests back then, many people were not really into that religious thing, but the thing is that priests were some of the people that were best educated. They had access to books and to a lot of knowledge. So many people who wanted to learn and who were intellectuals, they went into the religious side because they knew that was a legal way to get knowledge, because if someone who was a slave wanted to read or started talking about different ideas, that was totally punished. So normal people could not have access to knowledge or to many privileges. So being in the church was a way to get access to all this. So he was the leader of the movement, and the Spanish were very upset about this whole thing. They had a huge army, and they never expected the Mexicans to actually win the independence fight, because many of them were just country people. So they came out to fight with their machetes, with their knives, with whatever they could find. And they had never had any military training at all. But they were so angry, and the people who were in charge of putting all the independence movement together were so good at talking to them and making them understand that they needed to break free from this Spanish control. And then a year later, after the beginning of the movement, Hidalgo was captured. And this, to Spain, they might have thought, oh, okay, so we got the leader, we're gonna kill him, and we're gonna end with this. But they did like total opposite of what they were intending to do. Because he was treated in such a way that it was totally outrageous for everyone who learned about it. And it just like made people get even angrier than they were. He was executed on July 30th, 1811. He was subjected to military and ecclesiastic trials. He was stripped of his priestly status and executed in Chihuahua after being condemned for treason. People who were condemned for treason were supposed to face that way when they were executed, like cowards looking the other side. So he asked to die facing forward. He was granted that. And he has said to have distributed sweets among the soldiers who were going to fire against him, and instructed them to shoot his right hand, which he placed over his heart. Now, to me, this is very important because it's not just something that occurred to him in that moment. I mean, he must have thought that he probably was going to get caught, and he knew that he was going to be executed. So he knew that people, if he did this, people would not forget about it. Because he would not be like afraid and so they would be like mocking, oh, he was so afraid and he cried and he begged for pardon. No, he faced it with strength because he knew that he would become a symbol because he was a smart man. And that symbol was not going to be able to be erased in any way. He was then decapitated and his head was sent to Guanajuato and displayed in public at the Alhóndiga de Granaditas, which was a public house where people kept like groceries and wheat and corn and sorts of grains and stuff like that. So people saw the head there. And this was just something that made them feel very, very angry. So instead of just like scaring the rebellion and the people who wanted to fight, this was just like putting fire into the whole thing. So his popularity grew and he became a symbol with this whole thing that happened. So people kept fighting and the fight continued until it ended in 1821. And we always celebrate the Independence Day with, on the 15th at night, we have in every town, in every city of Mexico, the main political figure of the place stands on a balcony or some place that is like higher than ground level. And it's always like the same, it's not really a speech, but it's something that is said everywhere, all the time, it's the same. And we say, Viva Mexico, Viva Hidalgo, and go through different of the figures that were involved in this. And if there's something that happened lately that's very important for the country, it's also included in this. So people cheer, there's fireworks, as you know. And it's something very festive and very beautiful. You know, people get united, at least at that moment, thinking about how good it is to be Mexican. And how important it is that we got freedom from, now we're not a colony anymore. And that was something that totally changed everything for our country. So after that, the country was not going through stability, really, there were many other rebellions. There were, nothing was like really peaceful, you know. It was very difficult to build a natural nation, and the territory was so wide that things got very difficult, and there were specific areas of the country that the government just could not control because people were not happy with the way they were handling things. Everything was like centralized, and it just was a very, very hard thing for governors, for all the politicians, to try to put everything together into one republic. Many things happened during many, many decades, and we had several other foreign interventions. We have, for example, the Pastry War, which happened in 1838, and this was a conflict with France. France was under the reign of Louis Philippe, and some incidents happened with the French people who lived here in Mexico. The most famous one, which was the one that led to this intervention, was that France was requiring compensation for damage that had been done, supposedly by the Mexican soldiers, to a pastry business that belonged to a Frenchman. So that's why it's called the Pastry War. And that's what they call it in Spanish, la guerra de los pasteles. Pasteles was our cake. And it just lasted about a year. And France was so upset about this that they sent their army to block the seaport of Veracruz, and they bombed the city. Really, the problem was not really about the businesses that were attacked. You know, it was about economy and military pressure, and see what would happen with Mexico, how they would deal with it, if they would be able to come in and do something, you know. So Mexico paid for the damage, and that stopped the war. Afterwards, we had the Mexican-American War, which started in 1846 and ended in 1848. This resulted in the loss of a large portion of what was Mexican territory back then. States like California, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of other states went to the United States. This is a very complex and sensitive part of history for both countries. Most of the books that I have read about this are in Spanish, and they tend towards the Mexican side, you know. So it's really difficult to find something that is completely objective about it. Two of the books that I would recommend if you are Spanish speakers are this here. This one talks about the origins of the relationships between Mexico and the United States. It's very interesting. And there's also this one, which is Mexican Military Studies, which also describes the way that military acted during all the different interventions and situations that we have had involving rebellions and wars. So Mexico here, the thing is that it was such a big territory, and the political instability, and that mixed with the expansionist policies of the United States. So people up north, many of them complained that the Mexican government didn't care about them at all. They didn't send them what they required. And some people started crossing the border that was back then and starting to kind of like colonize some parts. So it became a very, very big problem. And eventually the United States came to Mexico and invaded. And one of the most remembered encounters of this whole thing was the battle in Chapultepec. The castle was used as a military college, so there were only students there, students and their teachers. Some of them were older, some were very young. And the battle was held there because the castle was a strategic point to defend the city of Mexico. So they attacked, and there were less Mexicans there to defend the country than the foreigners that were coming, which were also better armed, apparently. So the castle, in the end, fell, and the city was occupied. And the war ended 5 months later with the payment of $50 million by the United States and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which led the territory go to the other country. During this time, we have a story that we have all been told when we were growing up about the niños héroes, the hero children. So there has been many talk about this, if it was true or if it was not, if it's just some invention of the government to promote patriotism and things like this. You know, we really don't know because there's no way of really knowing what happened anymore. But it is said that 6 of the students in the military college were very, very young. They were teens, 14, 15, very, very young people. And they were the last who stayed there to defend the castle. And one of them threw himself from the castle wrapped up in the flag, which is something very beautiful. You know, it's a wonderful image to see someone doing that to preserve the integrity of the flag. And that is something that we were taught in school when we were growing up, and it's one of the most emotional things of the whole history of armed situations in our country. So after this intervention, now we finally come to Cinco de Mayo. There was economic crisis in Mexico, and we had a foreign debt with France, England, and Spain. So there were many problems, and Benito Juárez, who was the president, he stopped paying the foreign debt. So Spain, England, and France were very upset about this. Spain and England negotiated the payment of the debt, but France was under Napoleon III. And it was just not only about the money that was owed, but also about expansion and influence in the Americas that he was seeking, to have maybe an ally in Mexico if they were able to do something about the politics here, and stopping the influence of the United States as well. So the conflict started because France invaded Mexico. And the date that is usually celebrated is May 5th, because in May 5th, 1862, a battle was won by Mexico. But this was not the end of the war. This was just one battle that was won. The war actually ended much later, because in 1863, France came back stronger and took Mexico City, and they dismissed Benito Juárez as a president, and they installed Maximilian I, who would become like an emperor of Mexico. He came from the House of Habsburg, and they were very disappointed in Europe because they expected him to be an ally and to go along with what Europe wanted to do in Mexico. But it turned out that he started learning about Mexicans, about the culture. His wife Charlotte also was very interested in the people in Mexico. And he started feeling interested, and he started liking the way that Juárez was thinking about how to lead the country. And this was a surprise for Europe because they didn't really expect that. So they didn't really think he was going to help the way they wanted. So they kind of like they stopped supporting him after they realized that he was not really going to be the strong person that they wanted him to be, to control everything and to just like let Europe come and do whatever they wanted with Mexico, because that was not going to happen. So after the Civil War in the United States, the US put pressure on France